Thank you so much for having me today. So I know that everybody likes to see somebody on camera, especially during this time when we're seeing, humans on a different scale. But it would be easier for me with my notes, so I apologize, and I'm going to turn my camera off in a minute. But I wanted to introduce myself first, and also say hello and tell you a little bit about the program that we're doing today. We're going to talk about small business, and the struggling and issues that you might be facing today, and how you can find the help that you need. I am a financial attorney, and I have been one for over 20 years now. My business concentrates exclusively in helping individual consumers and businesses resolve debt. This is a very interesting time. I personally have been in business now and lived through and managed clients and financial issues through 9/11 and the 2008 issues as well. So I'm pretty well versed in navigating these type of waters, although this is certainly an interesting time for all of us, under the circumstances. So with that said, I'm going to turn my camera off now, and I'm going to kind of get more into the speaking points. So if there's any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to write them down and speak to us at the end about them. I can always be reached if there's something afterwards that you didn't want to talk about. If it's on a personal level, I totally understand. But for now, we're going to talk about our covered topics, and one of them is, of course, helping yourself. We're going to talk about new budgeting, your business debt, your employees, how to manage that, receivables, how you can still get paid, rent forbearance if you rent, and what options you might have, and some insider tips on how to ask for assistance. The CARES Act, which is super important today, including the PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. We're going to cover that. And we have about a half hour today, and those are detailed. There's a lot of details within those two programs. So I'm going to just cover the basics on them, but hopefully it's enough information to get you started. The next topic, we're going to talk a little bit about short-term financing options, of what else you could do if for some reason an SBA loan is not an option. And then, of course, pivoting and moving forward, because thankfully we will be on the other side of this at some point. They're already talking about how to open up the economy, and that means how are we going to be able to move forward in terms of our business. So the first step really is, if you haven't looked at your budget, you really should at this point. The reality is that, in businesses, budgeting is super important, but, owning a small business is no easy feat. Due to the COVID-19, and in times like this where there's a traumatic event, and again, traumatic events can include something like a 9/11, God forbid, a 2008, an economic crash, a pandemic, an earthquake, things like that are traumatic events for businesses. So whenever that occurs, you really have to go into emergency mode with your budget, and that means immediately looking at your current budget. And it's really important to reassess that budget, and frankly, like I said, you really should have done that already. If you haven't done it already, today is a good day to do that. Take a look at the income you have coming in, and when that income is coming in. Take a look at your expenses and really dig into what you can cut out. Contact all of your creditors and ask for forbearance options. Forbearance is a term that's used a lot in the mortgage world, but it really means to hold off making payments. Under the circumstances, there are a lot of creditors are offering forbearance options, including mortgage companies, the credit card companies. There even insurance payments that are due are offering forbearance options. So super important to contact your creditors and ask what options are available to you, and ways to cut your expenses now, including the suspension of non-essential expenses. This will likely include your payroll. It's time to trim down to as little as possible and purchase as little as possible for your business. If you are purchasing and you're in a business that is purchasing, you definitely want to talk to those vendors and find out what terms that they may have available. Remember, they want to be paid too, so be creative, offer something if you really have to purchase inventory or items for your business. But this budgeting should really be done often during a pandemic or other type of crisis and traumatic events. I personally look at my budget not only every week, but sometimes daily, since the environment is so dynamic. And I want to make that really clear that under the circumstances your budget might change regularly, and when your budget is changing, you have to be able to be flexible. Some days you might look at your budget and think that you're okay with certain expenses, and the next day you say, you know what, those expenses are not as important at this time, so I'm going to cut those out. And you want to be able to take a look and see, you're making business decisions now. I mean, it's not based on what you want, it's based on what is in the best interest of having your business survive. Remember, the goal through this whole process, not only for us as humans, is to be healthy, but also our businesses is to stay healthy and survive through this process. It's certainly challenging, and nobody has lived through this type of situation where business has been shut down the way it is. And it remains to be seen, obviously, what's on the other side of this. Each one of your businesses is unique, the way you run them is unique, and the way your business manages is unique. So you have to make the best decision for your business at this time. So be creative, find opportunities. In terms of your expenses, really take a look at them. I am advising you that it makes sense to call every single one of your creditors that's listed and have a conversation with them right now and find out what it is that they're offering you. Even if you're not really struggling, even if you have good cash flow, you cut down, you trim down a little bit, you brought your budget down, you're not spending. The truth is, right now is a really good time to have a conversation for each and every one of your creditors and paying attention to every line on your budget so you ensure that what you're spending on is really what you need to be spending on. I suspect that businesses are going to be run differently after this is over. The reality is that you may find that certain expenses that you had before that you were willing to spend on are not as necessary as they really seem to be, that you were able to live without them. And therefore, by being able to live without them, your business's bottom line improves and increases. So, and it really does help you in terms of negotiating and being able to ask. There is no shame in asking. Like I said, whether you're in trouble or not, whether your business is going to survive or not, the asking is super important. And don't be afraid to do that. There's no shame in that under any circumstance. So as far as your business debt is concerned, that's something to really take a look at as well. Right now, you want to, like I said, contact your lenders or financial institutions. Reach out and find out whether you can lower your monthly payments. Personally, we called all the credit card companies that we deal with on a regular basis for expenses, and we asked them for lower interest rates. And believe it or not, we were afforded a lower interest rate on a card we didn't expect to get such a low interest rate on, and as a result, we shifted our expenses to that card because the interest rate was so low. It's okay if you carry a balance and understand that that happens in businesses, but the question is how to manage that the most efficiently. So call up every single one of your creditors and ask them if you need to skip a payment now. Talk to them about skipping payments and what that means. How does it impact your credit? How does it impact you going forward? How are they going to report it? If there's interest and you're asking to skip a payment, ask how the interest is still being computed. Should you make an interest-only payment on a particular debt at this time in order to avoid it going into, let's say, collections or to be behind? Remember, one of the most important pieces of the puzzle here is that we don't want to make emotional decisions and quick knee-jerk reactions to what's happening. Everybody gets frightened and there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of unknown. And I know even for myself, when this first happened, there were lots of questions in my mind, like, should I pull cash out of the bank? Should I pull money out of our line of credit so that we have it in the bank? There were so many open questions in the early stages of this because, when you think back to other events that you've been through and that clients of mine certainly have been through, you start to worry about cash flow. even in healthy businesses, and I have a very healthy business, thankfully. But with that said, you start to worry and you start to panic a little, and you really have to say to yourself, under the circumstances, listen, take a step back from it. Try to take a breather. If you're not sleeping well and you need help, reach out to your trusted advisor to help you with that, or to colleagues even. There's lots of groups that I know in my attorney groups, everybody's reaching out to help each other and assist each other through these times. So, managing your business and then having to shift is very challenging. So, with that said, you're not alone in the circumstances, but it's okay if you need to skip a payment, but talk to those creditors about waiving their fees, lowering their APRs, not reporting late payments to the credit bureaus, and make sure you get that in writing, because, you may sit on the phone for 2 hours and get somebody on the phone that tells you yes, 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 but then you definitely don't want to be surprised with a negative mark on your credit later on when you come out of this. And also, you want to talk about the time frame of these type of changes. So if you need help paying your bills and you're asking for a forbearance, you want to understand what happens at the end of the forbearance, because remember, this is going to end. And thankfully, I feel like I can say that with absolute confidence. We will get through this. This will end a year from now. Hopefully, it'll be just a bad memory and we'll be past it. But with that said, what ends up happening for business owners and consumers, in my experience, is that they don't realize that there's an end, because you're so caught up in the crisis and you're so caught up in the day-to-day, how do I survive, that at some point when it does end and these opportunities go away, there will be a price to pay. And that price could be a hit to your credit. It could be you're in collections. It could be that they don't reinstate certain expenses or certain payments. So you want to be super careful right now in asking for assistance. In addition, I want to caution you that if you use COVID as an excuse, many of these creditors are looking for verified backup that you have a COVID-related impact. Not that the COVID exists, not that there's a pandemic, not that the governor shut down businesses, but that you yourself, your business was impacted. You might actually be in a business that is doing really well, and there are businesses under the circumstances that are doing well, or you may find that your business slid a little bit, but not enough that you were really impacted. So when you're asking for help and they're asking you for a hardship, I'm going to caution you to be very careful about the words that you use to your creditors and the statements that you make. Do not make statements to creditors that you cannot verify or back up, because you might find that you need to verify and back up with substantial documentation. And if you can't provide that documentation and they already gave you a forbearance or deferment or lowered your APRs or whatever, you might find that they actually put it back if you can't verify it, or that you're quickly put back into their queue and you can end up being behind. So I caution you when you go to your creditors that you ask them what they're willing to do under the circumstances. And if you really are impacted by COVID and you were sick or you had to care for somebody, or there was really some hardship that's verifiable, that you have that documentation to provide to your creditor. So create a plan to get caught up when this passes, of course. And like I said, some creditors may require hardship, so double check with their lender about that. And then make sure that you get everything in writing, because that's super important. So we all want to get paid. So in terms of your receivables, you probably have receivables on the books, and your clients are probably calling you and saying to you things like, I can't pay you right now, and what am I going to do? And can I skip my payment? Or maybe you've tried to process their payment and it bounced. So you want to look through your receivable list to forecast what kind of cash and collections you might be looking at. Who can you collect from this time? What other methods can you use to be creative in terms of getting paid? One of those may be that you start taking credit cards. Yes, you might pay 2 or 3% for that, but you know what? At least you're getting paid. And right now, the key is to get as much cash flow in the door as possible. You might also consider billing more frequently. I've talked to some colleagues who normally bill on a monthly basis, and they are now billing on a bi-monthly basis every other week, so that their clients are not hit with large bills at the end. It's a little more palatable when they receive the bill, and it's small enough that maybe they can make the payments. So updating and making sure you have updated payment information from your clients is super important. Call your clients right now, have a conversation with them and say, hey, how's it going? How are you doing? I understand business may be difficult for you right now. Maybe your business is closed down, but we do have an outstanding bill. Do you have any thoughts on how and when you might be able to make that payment? You know what? These days, picking up the phone may go a long way. You want to come out of this with clients. So on the other side, remember, keeping in the forefront of your thought process is that we will get through this. And so on the other side of this, you want to be remembered by your clients as somebody who is sympathetic, empathetic, understanding that you made adjustments for them under the circumstances. In my business, it becomes super difficult, and I'm going to use mine as an example here. So I'm a debt attorney helping people pay their creditors. So my clients pay us monthly, and that money goes to pay their creditors. I honestly can't make adjustments right now, and I tell my clients that. I'm straightforward with them. I cannot make adjustments in your payments right now. If you don't make the payment, I can't pay your creditor. And those creditors, because they've already given a discount on delinquent debt, are unwilling to give additional discounts. So when I have the conversation with the client, it's not an easy conversation. And you might find yourself in the same situation where you simply have to say to a client, unfortunately, right now, I can't suspend the payment. And this is the consequence if we did suspend the payment. If you have the flexibility, and in some cases I actually do have some flexibility with clients, maybe we're not using their entire payment to pay their creditors, I can adjust the payment. And I have found that anytime I've adjusted payments for clients, they are super thankful and super happy, and they feel relieved. And so I encourage you to have a conversation with your clients and say, how can we work together to get paid? You guys want to be paid. That's the name of the game. You need cash flow right now. So find those creative ways to get paid. Look for other payment methods, like I suggested, not only credit cards, but maybe you start taking Venmo. Maybe you start taking PayPal. And yes, there are fees attached to those things, but okay, so that might be a small price to pay in order for cash flow to be coming into your business right now so you can keep up with the bills that are most important. So in addition, there are some other options in terms of cash flow and getting paid. You might want to look into, and I wanted to put this in on this slide, business interruption insurance. You have to talk to your insurance broker about that, because the reality is that many of the policies out there are not covering this pandemic. But you may find that there's a loophole, and your insurance broker would be the best person to have a conversation with. You may also have insurance you might find on your credit cards for circumstances where those credit cards, you can't make the payments and the insurance can kick in. That's something you can have a discussion with your credit card companies about. You might also have had private insurance that would cover things like outsourcing collections, improving cash flow, and allow you to obtain some better lending rates. But again, that would be something that you would need to prepare to, and most small businesses are not prepared to that extent. But don't discount your business insurance. So I encourage you to reach out to your business broker and have a conversation about that. So as far as your employees are concerned, obviously we want to retain our employees, but we really need to examine where we're at right now in terms of the ability to retain employees, and if you have employees that are working remotely. So examine your business's policies for telecommuting, employee leave, and employee compensation. So this isn't an easy time for anyone, and certainly we don't want to be letting people off and letting people go, especially in small businesses where you really have that relationship with your employees. They're not just people who come in and do work. They're people that you have relationships with and you spend a lot of time with. If you need to furlough employees, then you need to. And it's understandable that you might feel badly and you don't want to lose good employees. So be open and honest with your employees about the options and what you're facing. Tell them that this is what I'm facing right now. I value you. I'm either going to keep you on part-time, or I'm going to have to furlough you at this time, and I want to hire you back, when things resume, and I plan to do so. Stay in touch with them on a regular basis. If they need to take off because they're caring for a loved one, give them the time that they need. If they're working remotely and that's super challenging, and we're facing that as well, and you're not used to having employees working remotely, you need to come up with a system where you can manage and monitor those employees for their work. either review your expectations and policies with your employees, have regular meetings with them, create spreadsheets so that they're providing you with what they're doing, and to the best of your ability, keep them in the loop and provide resources applicable to help them protect themselves at work and home. You want to really identify those essential employees that are required for your business to continue to run operations. Again, even in my own business where we have about 15 employees, obviously when the governor ruled most attorneys is non-essential, we did actually apply to the governor's office for an exemption to that, and still 3 weeks later haven't heard back. But we have a financial services aspect to our business which needs to continue to run. And with that, we need to have employees still working. So they are working remotely. And we did move a number of our full-time employees to part-time simply because without the commuting, without being in the office, they really are and should be more efficient when they're working from home. In addition, there's a limitation to what some employees can do from home. So the reality is, to hold somebody on 8 hours a day when they're not really giving you 8 hours of work may not make sense for your business. And I'm telling you this because I know you might feel badly for your employees and it's not what you want to do. It's certainly not what I want to do. But under the circumstances, you need to keep that budget tight, like I said earlier. And in order to keep that budget tight, you need to look at employees and determine, what you can all come up with. Maybe to keep everybody on, everybody takes a 25% pay cut. That's happening in a lot of businesses right now. A lot of executives are doing that. Maybe you are they're staying on part-time or they're working 1 day a week. You need to find some creative ways to manage that in order to stay within the budget. And that could change week to week. Frankly, 1 week you might have them part-time at 25 hours a week, and the next week you might cut them down to 15 hours because, again, keeping those expenses as low as possible right now is really the name of the game. So, your commercial rent forbearance. A lot of people are asking about paying rent right now. Do not just stop paying your rent. And that goes for your commercial rent, and that goes for your residential rent and mortgage. Don't just blindly stop. Have a conversation. In fact, I called Fairfield Properties, who's our landlord, and I said to them, I'd like to know what you're doing for commercial tenants. I didn't say I had a problem. I just asked, what are you doing for commercial tenants right now? And I got back a whole thing saying that we'll keep your secret private, that you're having trouble paying your rent, and contact the SBA to get a loan. I wrote back and said, listen, I appreciate the response, but I didn't say I was having trouble paying the rent. I asked you what you're doing for commercial tenants. And if the response is that you're sending them to the SBA for a loan, the answer really is they're not doing anything. They may be waiving though, and if you really are having a problem, call them up and say, I'm having a problem, I can't make the payment, or I'm waiting for a loan to come through. Can I have some extra time? You might find that they are willing to give you the time without a problem. But don't just blindly stop paying your rent. I really don't recommend that at all. That will not keep the relationship going, and you might want to also renew your rent at some point, renew your lease, and maintain that relationship with your landlord. So the communication is super important under the circumstances. Now, again, we don't have a lot of time, but I really want to cover the CARES Act, and I think it's super, super important to go over what the CARES Act is and how that is going to impact you. So the CARES Act is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, also known as the CARES Act. It's a law meant to address the economic fallout of the 2020 coronavirus pandemic that we're all experiencing right now in this country. The CARES Act is offering expanded unemployment, enhanced unemployment, student loan relief, stimulus checks are included in that, forbearance of mortgages and loans. So for our purposes today, we are only going to cover a couple of items that are really relevant to you as a small business. However, as a side note, if you have student loans, know that there is federally held student loan relief, and if you have that and that's part of your expenses, or you're paying that for your employees, that's something you want to look into. I'm just going to make the distinction here that it's federally held, not federally backed student loans, and there's a difference. Federally backed student loans can be held by private banks, so that relief is only related to that. The stimulus checks, that's going to be based on your income. So that's something you want to talk to your, and it has nothing to do with your business, but has to do with your income. So you might want to talk to your accountant about before you file, or either you file or don't file, because that could impact you getting the stimulus check and the amount of that check. Expanded unemployment and enhanced unemployment is super important to know about because you have employees, and you want to make sure that your employees understand that they are eligible to apply for unemployment, that a lot of the restrictions have been taken away, and that if you're furloughing them or you're cutting them their hours, that they should be directed to unemployment here in New York State. And the enhanced unemployment. Enhanced unemployment will give them an additional $600 a week from the feds, and that will cover up to about 13 weeks. So that's a really big help. That in many cases may help them get to close to what you were paying them, so that that furlough time is not negatively impactful on their situation. So you want to be aware of that. You know, for our purposes, I think the most important piece here is the PPP and the EIDL, and I'm going to cover those and try to go a little bit on the slow side with both of those. So the PPP is part of the CARES Act, and that they opened up applications for that recently last week, about a week and a half ago on the 10th. I believe it was, nope, the week before, I'm sorry. So with that, it's called the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. It's designed to support businesses with cash during this time. If you're a sole proprietor, an independent contractor, or a gig worker, you can apply. So on this slide, you'll see some of the requirements for that. But with that, it is designed to support American small businesses with immediate cash. So like I said, if you are one of these type of businesses, then you can apply for the PPP. This means that all small businesses qualify for the Paycheck Protection Program, and they're defining small businesses as those with under 500 employees for this purposes. So it includes the sole proprietors who report income and pay taxes on your Schedule C in your personal tax return, independent contractors who collect 1099, and so forth. The only stipulation, of course, is that your business was operational as of, February 15th, 2020. So if you started your business after that date, you would not be eligible. In this program, it's really an interesting program because you can you apply through an SBA approved bank, and it starts out as a loan. And if you use the funds for very specific purposes, including payroll costs, utilities, rent, health care, and you can prove that during the 8-week period post receiving the money, then that amount of money will be forgiven. And that means you won't have to pay it back. So it starts out as a loan, but then the funds can be forgiven if you can prove that. You will need to be able to prove that what you used the money on. So when you're submitting your loan application, though, you need to provide relevant documentation from your payroll, since the computation to get the loan is based on your payroll. So what does that mean? You need your payroll forms. So if you outsource your payroll, go to your payroll company and get the information. You need to find a bank that's an SBA approved bank, approved lender. If you have a relationship with a bank, I suggest strongly that you go through that bank, because most banks are servicing their customers first. And I don't mean that you have a Citibank credit card and you think you're a Citibank customer. That's not what I mean. I mean that you actually have your bank accounts and you have a relationship, and maybe you have a line of credit or you've done some business with a particular bank. That's the bank that you want to be having this discussion with, because you will be put at the back of the line behind their current customers. And the banks are very overwhelmed right now with these applications. Many people have gotten the applications in already, and there is a limitation on the funds. So that means first come, first serve. If you have not gotten your application in, and you want to apply for this program, then you need to do that ASAP. You can also apply, and the SBA has recommended that you apply to multiple banks. You can go to multiple lenders and submit the application. The application is super easy to fill out. We filled it out. We've already been approved for it. So the way it works is you will provide them the payroll information, and you will provide proof of who you are and your corporation. There's no personal guarantee. There's no credit check required. If at the end you cannot prove that you used the money for those purposes and the loan is not forgiven, it becomes and stays a loan. That loan has fabulous terms. You don't have to start paying for 6 months. It is a 2-year term, and the interest is 1%. So that's still a fantastic deal. So let's say you took $100,000 and 50,000 of it was forgiven and 50,000 was still a loan. You have 2 years to pay back the $50,000 at 1% interest. So it's a great opportunity. I encourage you as a small business to take advantage of it. Nobody should be charging you for help with that. Actually, they are not allowed to charge for help. So if you need help, you can call your accountant, financial people, attorneys, anybody who's out there. There is tons of information on this out there, but I want to caution you that when you're reading the information out there, that you need to read the most recent information, because when the president first announced that this was going to be implemented, within 3 days the program changed, and 3 days later, on the date the application opened up, the program changed again. And in fact, we had our application already in, and they changed some of the requirements. We had to terminate that application and submit a new application. But again, don't be discouraged by the application process. It's super easy. And like I said, no collateral or personal guarantees on this. There's no fees charged for this. And it's a great opportunity to keep cash flow going for your business. So I strongly encourage you to look into that. If you need additional help with it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. It's certainly not a problem. The other type of loan that's out there is the SBA loan called EIDL. And the EIDL is Economic Industry Disaster Loan. And with that, there are some key takeaways of that type of loan. Part of that loan is the $10,000 advance. You might have heard about that. You're able to apply through that process for this $10,000 forgivable advance. That advance money, it's up to $10,000. So it's not a guaranteed 10 grand. So, but understand also that if you apply for that and the PPP, that the amount that you're given under the EIDL for, with this piece of it will be reduced on your PPP. You have to qualify as a small business by the number of employees. The maximum loan is $2 million. Non-for-profits can apply. The normal EIDL application has been streamlined and should take about, maybe they say 2 hours, but give yourself some time and to put that together. Finally, the SBA says your loan advance would come in a few days. And like I said, if you apply for the PPP, the loan up to the $10,000 amount under the EIDL will be subtracted from it. So the EIDL is different than the PPP program. Keep that in mind. It has some different terms and a different application process. And this one will require that there's a little more background information on this. And it's a loan. It's not a forgivable amount, with the exception of the of that up to $10,000. So be sure that you understand and you check the box indicating you want to be considered for the advance on the loan application, and double check with your bank that they have the information so that it can be submitted for you, because you really want to be able to take advantage of that. That up to $10,000 does not have to be repaid. It's an emergency relief, making it effectively a grant. To receive that, you, like I said, you apply through the EIDL and check that box indicating you want to be considered, and it should fund in a few days. Again, have that relationship with the bank so that you can understand that. And again, it has to be an SBA approved bank. So some other short-term funding, if you don't qualify for the SBA loans, if for some reason you're not qualifying, one of the reasons why you're not qualifying could be criminal history. It could be back child support payments also, and there may be some other reasons. Also, if you pay, somebody asked me this today, they have a restaurant, they pay employees cash off the books. Can they include that information? No, not unless you want to have a problem. I don't recommend that. You obviously are supposed to pay employees on the books. If you're paying them off the books and you want to report that, you could be sure that that will trigger a red flag, and you likely will be contacted by the IRS and the state at some point. So be sure also, if you have multiple businesses, that you don't take money for one business and use it for another business. Be really super careful here. There's a lot of information now starting to come out about how the SBA, they're going to use this as an opportunity to hone in on fraudulent businesses. So you can be audited. So keep in mind that you want to keep this super clean. If you use QuickBooks or otherwise, I suggest that you keep a separate spreadsheet on your expenses that you use the money for, so that you can easily justify that and you can provide it within a timely manner. Do not cross businesses, and it also has a cap on what you can pay employees of $100,000. So if you were paying yourself over 100 or another employee over 100, it'll cap it at 100. But again, any of the expenses that you're looking to include in anything that's forgivable, you have to keep separate and provable. So you want, that's super important. All right, so moving on. Other short-term funding options. There are other short-term funding options that are out there. You can contact some your banks and see what options there are. But again, you know, that may take a little bit longer. It could take weeks to fund that, and that may be more problematic versus the SBA loans and the PPP program, which are funding super fast. Obviously, they want to do that so that you can keep your business running due to these circumstances. But there are other services such as something called Kiva, if you've never heard of that. It provides lending options for those who don't qualify for the offerings of SBA, and it is a not-for-profit for small businesses and struggling businesses. So that's definitely a good option as well. It's called really a micro lending platform. So you can look that up and find out about what options they're offering you. But those are some other short-term lending options. So moving on and getting close to getting close to the end here, we want to talk a little bit about what to do moving forward. Now is a really good time because they're starting to talk about opening things up, which I'm personally super excited about. And you should be too, but what does that mean for your business? Right now, you really want to have a plan in place, not only of what's happening now in your business, but what do you plan to do when you open up? You know, how long can you last on the cash flow that you currently have? And we have no word on how long it's going to take for them to open up and which business that you might have. You might be in a business that's kind of low on the totem pole in terms of essential, and you might find that your business isn't opening for 2 more months. Can you survive during that amount of time, and what can you be doing for your business? What does it look like when you open up again? What is your budget? You know, you can have a proposed budget for that time, and talking about, you know, how are you going to accommodate your key customers? What kind of marketing are you going to do to reopen your business and start the cash flow again? You know, what opportunities can you create for clients to come back to you? Even now, you know, maybe you have a service business and you want to offer a discount to those workers out there who are on the front lines, hospital workers, healthcare workers. Think creatively about what you could do for your business in terms of getting cash flow back in the door. You know, buy now, pay later, gift certificates if you're in that kind of a business, even financial services type of businesses, and look for real creative ways. Now's the time to start thinking about the future and being positive. You know, we've all been kind of sitting in this, you know, what's going to happen, and thankfully we're starting to see some positive changes out there in terms of what's happening with COVID. But your number one goal is always to keep yourself healthy. And keeping yourself healthy really does include mentally, physically, and emotionally. And this has been really draining. It's been certainly draining for myself, and it's been certainly draining for my clients. And I'm sure for you guys out there too, that it's been super draining. And you know, the fear of the unknown and what's going to happen with your business is very frightening. And I too have woken up in the middle of the night in a panic. So so understand that you're not alone if you're experiencing that. But it's time to start thinking about you not only staying healthy physically, but also how to keep your business going on the other side of this. And we're starting to think about that on our end. What can we do for clients? We know that people are going to have debt on the other side of this, even if they've had forbearance. We absolutely know that's going to happen because we dealt with it for years post 9/11, and we dealt with it for years post 2008, and sometimes we still see post 2008 issues come in through the door. So this is going to be years and years of financial impact. It's a question of what you do about it now that is going to make the difference, and being positive and trying to find creative ways to help yourself. Yeah, there's no doubt that your business may take a hit, and that's okay. Figure out, what have you learned from this? Now's the time while we're still kind of cooped up. What have you learned in your business that you need or don't need? I'll tell you on my end what I've learned. I learned that I don't need as much office space as I currently have, and that when my lease is up in 6 months, that we're probably going to take less office space. I'm still going to have the same amount of employees and probably more employees, but we have learned to be a lot more efficient on how to manage that. I learned that I need an emergency plan in place that, God forbid, we can't get back into the offices again and somebody shuts the lights out like they did and said, all of a sudden, you can't go back to work starting tomorrow. What does that mean? Some of my staff were completely unprepared in terms of the use of their computers at home. I have found employees, some have stepped up, and I've been really surprised at some who have stepped up and some who haven't. So learning about your employees and then being able to make decisions based on that. You know, a crisis communication plan with your employees is super important, and your clients. I also was very concerned in my business what was going to happen in the beginning. And you know what? My clients are super dedicated to getting out of debt, and I really respect them for that. And I work really hard around the clock to make sure that I pay their debts and work with their creditors. And I am proud of my clients, and I'm sure to tell them that they have really tried very hard through this to keep up with their payments. So supportive, encouraging environments. You know, they don't always see the blood, sweat, and tears that I go through to help them get to where they're going, but that's okay. I see it, and that's what's most important. But with that, you know, what is it that you can do now? You know, you have a little bit of a downtime. Maybe you're not as busy. There are so many courses out there available to help enhance your business and your skill set. There are all the Ivy Leagues are offering free courses on everything from accounting to marketing to management. Take a course, understand you and your business. You know, what did you learn about this for yourself? Did you learn that there's a weakness in yourself and your business here, and what can you do to get through it? One of the things that we learned actually in Hurricane Sandy was that we needed a voice over IP system, because when Hurricane Sandy came, and that was another traumatic event, we didn't have a phone system, and my clients were worrying whether my business was still in business. So that's one thing I learned from the past that took me straight through here, and as a result of having that plan in place, we were able to transition some of our employees outside, and through the computer transition the phone system so that we didn't miss a beat with our phones. So that's just one example, but those are some things that you really want to think about. That does impact your economic bottom line. You want your staff and you want your clients to be able to get in touch with you. We also were able to very quickly put information up on our website, and if you go to our website, you can take a look at that at taynelaw.com. But we were able to put up a COVID banner and information, and send out quickly information to our clients to let them know what's going on. Stay in touch with everybody and anyone to try to help you through this. So in conclusion, if anybody has any questions, please feel free. This is all my contact information, and you can follow us. We're super active on Twitter, on Instagram, LinkedIn for sure, Facebook. We are very, very active. We have a full in-house marketing team that are on this 24 hours a day. So we send out a lot of really good information. So please, if I skipped over something or I went too fast and you need follow-up information, don't hesitate to contact us. I'm sure you can get a copy of this and any other notes that you need. So I'm going to turn the camera back on now, so you guys, and if you have questions, please let me know.
Okay, great. Thanks, Leslie. I will remind everyone, if you have a question, you can email info@savvyladies.org, or you can use the chat box. And I'll get started with the first question here for you. There are income minimums for the SBA disaster loan, which is essentially a grant up to $10,000. Is it $75,000 income minimums?
No, there's no income minimum, certainly on the PPP program at all. So on the PPP program, which is slightly different than the EIDL, remember the Paycheck Protection Program, that would be whatever is on your paychecks. That is, it's multiplied by 2.5 times. So there's actually a formula on that. As far as the EIDL, you know, it's the $10,000 grant is an up to amount. So when you apply, you're going to have to provide your income information. You know, obviously, if you you can't show any income, then you're going to have difficulty proving that you need the money and what you need the money for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. The next question is asking, what if you're able to continue to make student loan payments, however you're not interested in deferment or forbearance with the COVID-19 option? Can you clarify about the 0% rate?
Sure, I certainly can. And absolutely good for you. If you can and you want to continue making payments, you should, because the way it works is that they're on the federally backed, federally held student loans. What they're offering you is a forbearance option where you don't have to pay for 6 months and 0% interest during that time and no collection efforts. So what that means is that between now, when it started, and I think it's the end of September, September 30th, there is no interest. So if you want to make the payments, you should, because every payment that you make will reduce your principal balance. As a result of reducing your principal balance, let's say your balance was $100, and every month you make a $5 payment over the next 5 months. By the time when you get back, you'll owe the $25 left, you'll owe only $75. So the new interest will be calculated based on the new principal amount. So you'll actually be paying less interest, less principal, and you'll be able to pay off your loans faster. So if you can do that, you might have to make manual payments, because if you go into your dashboard, you may see that your payments were suspended, and you may see that there's a zero due. And it's no different than being in school where they don't require the payment. You probably have to go in and make manual payments on it every single month. But yeah, absolutely. If you could do so, then do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And the next question is just wanting some clarification on EIDL and if that's a loan.
So the EIDL is a loan, yes. What's not a loan is the emergency funds up to $10,000. That's considered a grant, but the actual EIDL is a loan.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep. So that does require some disclosure, a little bit different than the PPP program. I mean, it's a streamlined application, but it is a little bit different than the PPP program. So the immediate relief is really for the $10,000, that loan advance. But you can apply, you had asked me about the loan amount, you can apply for the EIDL loan up to $2 million to provide working capital for expenses such as fixed debt and payroll costs. There is an interest rate on that, so please be aware of that, at 3.75%, and the loan could be as long as 30 years. There's an automatic 1-year deferral on repayment, though interest does begin to accrue when the loan is dispersed. Again, that's different than the PPP program, so please be aware of that. It will require you to provide more information on the EIDL than on the PPP. Citizenship, of course, is required, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If you have time for another question, this one is saying, I've had to furlough about 50% of my staff for now, and ultimately I want to get everyone back to work. If I want to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program and have the loan forgiven, do I need to rehire everyone first to qualify, or can I do that after getting the loan?
No, you can do it after you have the loan. Nobody expects you to hire people without having the money. So apply for that loan ASAP. Remember, first come, first serve on that, and it could take some time. It'd probably take a week to process and then another week to get the money. So a good 10 days. So you want to apply for it right away, but you do not have to rehire your staff before you apply or during the application. Once you're approved and you get the money, then you can rehire your staff if you want, or you can keep them part-time, and depending on how it works for you and how much money that you're approved for.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Leslie, I just want to let you know in the chat, I'm seeing comments here about learning and having a plan in situations such as a pandemic was really helpful. I'm thankful for the many resources that you shared today. And another message, this was a great webinar. So I just want to let you know that I'm seeing all the messages of thank you and that it was really helpful today. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, they're able to contact you here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. At TayneLaw.com. My info at Tayne Law, Tayne at Tayne Law is me. My marketing is Leah, L-E-A at Tayne Law. But certainly this is always to get us. You can tweet at us. You can DM me. You can, whatever you want to get in touch with me. You have other questions about any of these other programs or otherwise, how it relates to your business. Maybe you didn't want to ask a personal question on here. You're welcome to contact me anytime. There's if you come from this, of course, there's never a charge to speak to you, and we don't charge for consultations. So if there's anything we can ever do, then please don't hesitate. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I know we didn't have as much time to go through really in depth, but it's enough information, certainly, hopefully, to clear up at least some of the confusion that's out there on what's available for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Oh, and I just saw a message. You were very thorough, so I'm sure everyone got a lot out of this today. So we will send out this information that Leslie has here on this slide. So if you didn't have a chance to write it down, we'll send that out. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you so much, Leslie. It was really great.
Thank you, everybody, and good luck. Stay strong, and we're almost, there's a light at the end of this tunnel.
Yes, yes, crossing our fingers we get through this soon. Thanks, Leslie.
You're welcome. Stay healthy.
Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.